it's as much fun as it is to complain about old jobs. It's really nice to stop in here and have everybody join me about talking about some tabletop.
I see something on here.
So welcome everybody, discussing tabletop. It is, of course, the 11th of February.
Yes.
You know, hey, already first week done in February. Gerbs. Indeed, Lightning. Gerbs.
Well, technically this is the second week of February.
I guess so.
Because we had like 4 days.
Yeah, the full week. First full week, I'll call it. Yeah, there we go. I can come up with the proper way of saying these things. Anyway. Yeah, so, we got a couple of things to talk about today. I threw, of course, the docket up in chat, but if you are seeing this on YouTube or somewhere else or later on where you can't see the docket, we're going to talk a little bit about the Magic set. I'm more just going to go over the basics of that. There was a big thing with Fallout Wasteland Warfare with a bunch of new products for it. We're going to talk about a update by Onyx Path Games. That's a game, and a couple of other RPGs that are up on Kickstarter. First thing I'm going to talk about then is, I guess, Phyrexia All will be one. I'm going to tell you, I looked through the cards, I looked through the mechanics, it's fine. I don't like the story at all, honestly. Mm-hmm. I think it's I know they're going to do something like stupid and time travel-y or something in the next one and like undo a bunch of things but also change a bunch of things, and I've heard about what their rumors for on the game side of design for what their aim is, where they're, because of Commander, they're taking step backs from Planeswalkers. They're, rather than like where they originally were, they were just mythological figures, and then they became cards. They're gonna probably drop their overall power again, and the idea of like legendary characters will become much more important because they are used in Commander decks, and you know that's why they want to focus more on things that are related to stuff you use in your Commander deck. Because Commander is king.
I mean, it's kind of the only thing anyone plays.
Honestly, I would have preferred they just keep, like, either making new planes or have stories that are related just to those planes and stop, like, a lot of, like, the travel between planes and stuff storylines.
My big problem is it's the MCU problem, right? Where they had the big story, right? Mm-hmm. They had the War of the Spark, and then that ended, and like a lot of people just fucking died. And it's kind of like, man, why are you doing another one so soon?
I think that's exactly the problem. That's also the problem I have with the MCU. I would like it if they have more movies like Shang-Chi, or honestly, I liked, like, you know, the second Black Panther. They have some good movies they have. It's just they're having too much of their big storyline already quickly, I think, too.
It's like, and this is just my opinion, a lot of the Planeswalkers that exist currently aren't that interesting, story-wise, because they killed off a lot of the interesting ones.
They killed off all the interesting ones and rewrote a bunch of the ones that were kind of interesting, too.
Like, I mean, the most interesting one is the Emperor of Kamigawa. She's technically not a Planeswalker. She can't control her spark. Mm-hmm. She's just someone who can plane or travel. I know Johnny's still cool, but they fucked his story up with Phyrexia again.
I liked Tamio.
Tamio pissed me off when they Phyrexia'd her.
Yeah, that kind of pissed me off too.
Anyway, that rubbed me off. That rubbed me the wrong way. I mean, Tezzeret, he's alright. He's a cool dude.
Sarkham, I like him, the dragon guy.
Yeah, he's cool.
I like his idea because he erased himself from history. That was an interesting thing. It's like, I don't exist anywhere anymore because I changed time and like on my home plane, so I don't exist there anymore. But I'm a planeswalker. That means I can survive because I'm now connected to all the planes. So it's like, well, fuck me. That's a weird thing to do. Erase your own history. See, they have interesting ones, but then they like Jace is.
Jace is the most boring one. He's like just in everything.
Like, if you read his history, they had, like, a spark of something there, but they just use him in boring ways.
Used too much.
That's also true. So, I feel like, yeah, this entire storyline is, like, kind of like, I'm like, I just don't care about the storyline right now.
I've said it before. I don't really like Phyrexia because, like, I feel like it's too late to use Phyrexia again.
Mm-hmm.
I don't like this incarnation of Phyrexia is dumb. And I feel it's done like that's not really Phyrexia.
I feel like what they did at the end of the Scars block, they could have developed it a little bit more.
Yeah.
Because the thing is, at that point in time, there was still a war between all 5 colors. And they, off-screen, basically, is like, up, Elish Norn won.
Yeah.
And I'm like...
no development.
They just skipped ahead of a lot of stuff. And I'm like...
Yeah.
Like, if you had done more stuff with that was the interesting part of it, is like, what happens when you introduce those other manas to the concepts of Phyrexia? And that would have been an interesting thing to explore, but they didn't kind of homogenize it a little bit and made it, like, not a thing. And
nope.
It's like, I look at the cards and it's sort of there, but not really. And, like, I'm okay with them not bringing back Infect. Infect was very powerful, but they have
Infect is a broken-ass ability, especially when you combine it with some other stuff.
They just basically made it that they've still proliferate. They have ability that if they if they deal damage equal to their power as poison counters. And I'm like, they don't do the death touch -1/-1 counters. I'm like, honestly, I'm fine with halving that.
Yeah.
Still a deadly thing, but less deadly to creatures. You know, now I can block those creatures and not have to worry about it as much or try to kill them. Keep them away from me. What other ability? The artifacts that summon a rebel, Mirrodin, that's fine. I mean, it's like the actual mechanics I found were fine. Like, that's the weird thing. It's sort of like, it's a fine mechanical set. I looked through a bunch of stuff. It looked fine. It's okay. I just feel like, you know, they're taking a shit out there on the story and going in a stupid direction, and it's like, I can predict what they're going to do is the sad thing.
Yeah, I mean, because it's the common, like, time travel. When you introduce time travel, you only have one way of doing something.
You know, and the thing is, specifically in the set before, they had Teferi time travel, and it's sort of like, oh yes, we have Teferi time travel. What does that mean? He's gonna change history. Oh no, things will be different. Wow.
Yeah. Also, the Black Planeswalker Phyrexia lady, I think, is like kind of lame.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, like.
Vraska, she's like a little lame.
Like, the thing is, like, I read up on a lot of the Planeswalkers back during Children of Wrath, and Vraska actually has a fairly interesting story too. The thing is, they never show it in like any of the major storylines.
No, this is the first time she's like shows up.
You know, they always do it in like small storyline things here and there. In card wise, I think when they introduced her back in Ixalan, it was fine, you know. But I feel like either visiting new places or having interesting internalized stories to revisit places is really the way they should go, and they don't do that. And I think that's the problem. Like, you know, I feel like, honestly, if we kind of disclude War of the Spark, all 3 blocks of Ravnica worked fine because they were each their own interesting storylines. You know, it was the first one was introducing it, then it was the upshake of, like, you know, the guilds and stuff, and trying to, like, you know, stabilize things with, you know, I was fine with Jace becoming a living guild pack. You know, I'm like, fine, whatever, you're an administrator now. There, you can probably have some interesting stories. Did they use them any interesting way? No. And then the last one being like, oh, the people that are in guilds are, like, up in arms because they've been abused for 1 billion years. That's another interesting storyline that's Ravnica-based. And now, yes, it led to War of the Spark as the 3rd set, which was like, okay, whatever, you know, it's coinciding. That's fine. The first 2 can be their own thing.
Mm-hmm.
But it, like, you know, even, like, well, except for the last 2 sets of Innistrad were kind of terrible. That's the kind
of they were just, like, poorly done.
Yeah.
Rather, like, mechanically they were fine, but the way they were sold was really bad.
The other sets of Innistrad were fine. You know, I thought the when you went to normal horror, and then you're like, oh hey, Eldritch horror with like space Cthulhu and magic, the Eldrazi showing up. I mean, that was fine too. I thought those are fine storylines. Anyway, I just I feel like we've complained about it a lot, and I'm already like, get your next set over with. I just want you to move on to something more interesting.
I'm not excited for really this storyline block, and if they like Phyrexia the Emperor, I will just be mad because you just fucking introduced her.
I feel like they're just going to undo all the Phyrexians.
I feel like also she's just not going to show up again because she's incredibly broken.
I just...
It's just like... Man, I don't know, the Kamigawa storyline was just like really good, and then these other ones have been kind of shit.
Yeah, no, it's very true. They've just can't keep with like just decent like sort of storylines. They gotta like spin things very quickly, and
yeah, I'd like to just see random shit on planes. I don't want to see Phyrexia again.
We have to wait till, I guess, later on this year. We'll get a new Eldraine set, a new Ixalan set. And honestly, if they are very standalone, I'll be happy about them. Like, Eldraine wasn't my favorite. I thought it was neat, though. Ixalan wasn't my favorite. I thought it was neat, though. There could be interesting storylines in both of those. Let's see.
As we've seen, the original Kamigawa set was terrible. Neon Dynasty was real cool and good.
Yeah.
So they could improve a lot with what they learn, maybe. Or more likely they won't. And it's money.
Like more storybook stuff in Eldraine, I think that was fine. And like for Ixalan, honestly, one of the things they didn't explore a lot of is Ixalan's of one continent. There's apparently an entire continent ruled by like conquistador vampires.
Yeah.
Why don't we learn more about that? That seems like an interesting thing.
No. Phyrexia.
It's internalized that, but I don't know if they'll do that with Lost Cowards.
I mean, they might. Who knows?
We might learn a little bit more.
Writes this shit.
Who knows? Let's just Modifi's been a little quiet about a lot of stuff for Fallout Wasteland Warfare. They haven't had a lot of it, and they just like blurbed out like a whole lot of stuff over the week here yesterday. They're like, hey, on the 10th, we're just gonna have all these things. Enjoy a bajillion products. So that is what they did. A bunch of print-at-home stuff. It looks like you can probably get it also. Let me just see here. Okay. So yeah, no, this is a lot of like decorations for your game.
Yeah. So the nice thing about this is, for the most part, the terrain hasn't been like anything special, but they're doing vault exploring now, which is cool. City ruins and then just the wasteland is nice.
Yeah.
I'm trying to see what figures do that, or what, rather what.
Here.
I have the Zentians, which are the aliens from that show up occasionally, which are cool.
Here's the new releases page where they've got all this stuff they've released, which was a lot of the print at home, and they've introduced like the aliens and a bunch of other things, which I don't know if they've. Those are not, I don't think, out yet. Those are coming out.
Not.
Yeah, so they've kind of like announced those along with all the other stuff. They're gonna do a Zentian core set apparently.
They are a major part of the Fallout. Well, kind of major. But they've only been fleshed out in Fallout 3. And it was the best part of Fallout 3.
Yeah. It was definitely interesting that, like, it's something that's not... It's, like, hinted at here and there, but it's really only shown Fallout 3.
It shows up once in every game. Each mainline Fallout game has a reference to them. Fallout 1, you could, I think, just find an alien blaster. I think Fallout 2, you found a crashed ship and had a portrait of Elvis inside of it. 3 in New Vegas, you could get the... 3, you could just get the blaster. New Vegas, you had to take a special trait to get it. Otherwise, you would just get the Gauss rifle. And then 4, you could just get to see a trashed spaceship. And then 3 obviously had the DLC focused around them entirely.
Yes. You know, as much as interesting as Fallout is as a universe, it also has like an actual alien species that's visiting Earth and checking it out. And you know,
like Fallout is at its core, sure. On the surface, though, Fallout looks like a very kind of serious post-apocalyptic survival world. But if you actually delve into it, it's very 50s and 60s pulp fiction, which is why I love it. That is pulp fiction is my favorite type of fiction. It's very dumb and silly.
One of my favorite movies is a 1950s horror movie. I'm sorry, I will always love the movie Them.
Yep.
It's like it's giant ant puppets, and it's so silly.
Yeah, I mean, Weird West is my favorite genre. I love westerns with weird fantasy or alien shit, and that's a very pulp genre.
There's just something about that aesthetic that is sort of like, because I guess it's before a lot of like our crazy technology and stuff. It's sort of like the innovation, I think, is a lot of things too. You know?
I will say, I'm looking at because they've added Brahmin, which I don't believe there were Brahmin miniatures before. If there were, they were super limited. I really like that there is one that just has 2 big Gatling guns strapped to it.
I mean, sometimes you just need a Brahmin with Gatling guns.
Yeah, I mean, you can't always have a vehicle, but you can always have a cow.
So again, most of the stuff that they've kind of like released with their big is they talked about what they're planning for it.
Yeah.
And of course, you know, the big thing is you can get the print at home, all the little like decorations. They've got 1 billion of them.
Okay, so the next, it also looks like one of the next expansions will focus on Fallout 76 stuff in the Appalachia, which is cool because, well, Fallout 76 was pretty rough at launch. It does have a very cool world.
They've developed it a lot more since they released it.
So I'm glad to see that they're doing stuff like that.
Yeah. I think it's the thing is like 76 will always be controversial because like I think they wanted too much of current Fallout in this old Fallout prequel. It's sort of like it's like doing like a Star Trek prequel.
Yeah, and this is like, I don't know if you can count this as a spoiler. The game's ancient at this point, and also it made like kind of news headlines. Basically, Bethesda loves using the Enclave and Brotherhood of Steel for some reason, so they just shoved them into 76, which happens before either of those factions existed.
Because
technically the Enclave always existed, but they were still on the outbreak.
Because I was gonna give the like Star Trek comparison of like, you know, Enterprise did a good job of being like, hey, our technology but per primitive, and then you have like Discovery, and it's like this looks better than the original series. It's not an in between.
It's the nostalgia thing, right? Like you want to show off the cool bits.
But please make it fit into the thing. You could have an organization that's not the Brotherhood of Steel that maybe is a precursor to some people that join it or something or help form it, or, you know, maybe yes, there could be like if the Enclave is kind of still in hiding or stuff. Maybe it's a group of them that splintered off and wanted to go back out to the world.
You can do a lot of interesting stuff. Also, I guess it also kind of depends on what Bethesda lets them do, right? Because they're not allowed to do much outside of the West and East Coast established canon because the other games have been decanonized. So there's nothing. None of the Texas stuff exists. None of the Midwest stuff actually exists. Despite, well, Fallout Brotherhood Still is a terrible video game. had a very interesting setting.
Yeah.
And Tactics is one of the best tactical games ever made. Just had kind of a wish-washy story.
Yeah. So, if you're interested in more stuff with the Wasteland Warfare, and remember that Wasteland Warfare does have an RPG version of it. If you want to check that out, you get more stuff because it combines the two of them, war game and RPG, and
If you like war games, I am of the opinion that Wasteland Warfare is one of the best ones on the market right now. It is also not super expensive, unlike most other ones.
Yeah. Let's talk about playing a dog in a role-playing game.
Hell yeah, dog.
Dog. Pugmire. It's getting a new edition. If you do not know about Pugmire, it's basically Onyx Path, the people that for many, many years took over the World of Darkness stuff before they came out with the current edition of Vampire. And Onyx Path still produces some World of Darkness stuff, not directly vampire stuff anymore. But they also came out with a world that's basically like I guess it's supposed to be post-apocalyptic. I don't know, actually. But it's like a fantasy system where you're like... Originally it was Pugmire, which you were dogs, but they came up with like factions of like cats and rats and stuff that live on this world that are basically anthropomorphic dogs and stuff, you know? Anyway, it's the second edition of Pugmire. It's I think it's like years old now, Pugmire.
Pugmire is pretty old. I think, yeah.
So, yeah. Man did exist. They're the old ones. So it's like, you know, these are like people die out and like man, cat, and all the others like, you know, basically evolved to intelligence and took over, you know, stuff from man and stuff, kind of like this. But anyway, fantasy kind of weird. Again, that's why it's weirdly post-apocalyptic too. So it's fantasy, post-apocalyptic, kind of strange, but you play as like dog people. And I mean, you know, I think
dogs.
So I mean, they do mention like, you know, I think it's Pugmire, the Kingdom of Pugmire, the Monarchies of Mao, and I can't remember the rat one, but there was like a rat one too.
I don't remember the rat one. I've actually never played Pugmire.
I haven't either, but because I was always checking Onyx Path because they were doing all the World of Darkness stuff for a long time. I still do check out their site, you know, occasionally for some interesting things they do. They did the new like Aberrant and Adventure and stuff like that also. So like I do see occasionally when they're doing stuff with Pugmire, so it's interesting to see that they've Now here's some information I really didn't know until just a second ago. It's out of Pennsylvania. Onyx Path.
Hell yeah. I didn't know that either. That's funny.
Because it's, you know, the little summary they give for like Kickstarters. It's like founded in 2012. It's a Pennsylvania-based company out of Macungie. Holy crap, that's actually kind of near me. I've heard of Macungie.
Yeah, I've never been there, but I've been to King of Prussia, which is kind of close.
Yeah. King of Prussia is a fine place. It's got a very good thing. Okay. Okay, so Macungie is right outside of, to the west of Allentown. Gotcha.
Yeah.
That's why I've heard of it, because
I'm sorry, why is there an East Texas in Allentown?
Please don't ask. You're asking Pennsylvania why they do anything. I don't know why we do anything here. Madness. Anyway, yeah. It's cool. They've put it out now. It's honestly, it's funded. You know, it's a game that has certainly its fans, and it's an interesting game, kind of like anyway. Like I always thought it looked kind of interesting. You know, I'm not usually much for like very like anthropomorphic creatures and stuff like to this degree. Yeah, but
that's fair.
I honestly, you know, interesting enough storylines or character creation and stuff. Yeah, it works pretty well. Look,
That's fair.
you know, a side tangent that's related to role playing game. When I heard of someone tell a story, where it was like linked somewhere. I was like, you know, on internet, but it was a story about someone that was like convinced their DM to let them play a bear.
Oh, I think I know this story.
The bear that's like
The bear with like the really high deception or whatever.
Yeah, it's like super deceptive and it's intelligent and hires on a butler who's got an item to speak with bears. So it just makes like growling noises. And then like at the one like king's dinner after they've been like knighted for their heroic quest as this bear in disguise, like someone's like, "Hey, that's a bear!" They get kicked out.
I do remember that story, yeah.
I'm like, oh my god, that's like a quintessential like D&D story of just like someone who's like role playing game story. It's like, I'm just playing a bear. Let's see here. What else is out this week? I got 2 RPGs to talk about, related things. First one is Cyberpunk Goblins.
Goblins?
Yeah. Odd Gobs. It's, yes. It's goblins surviving the gig economy in a cyberpunk dystopia. That's such a weird thing.
Fair enough.
Yeah. So you do have like your game master. It's at least 2 players. You can do it. One person is putting gigs for the goblins, basically jobs. And then the goblins will travel through the cyber metropolis to their destination, perform their tasks, return safely to a safe space, and negotiate pay. So I guess it's like it's such a weird system, but also like it's a simple one. It's not meant to be really a complex system.
Yeah.
I feel like it's like a weird half comical Shadowrun Light. I'd even call it, you know, like it's without the fantasy.
It's goblins, you know, it's gonna be a bit silly.
Yeah, and it's like doing the strange, weird, goblin-related jobs and stuff, and trying to get it off as like a, I guess, what's the word I'm looking for? Because like when you're not like type of employee, like brain, no work, well, good, speak English. Temporary employee that you're hired on for one job. Contract? Well, I guess contract is a good way to say it.
I mean, contract is you're temporary and you're hired for a specific thing for a length of time.
Yeah. Or like, you know, if like, I guess the, I don't know if it's a thing anymore in California, because I don't know enough about California. Like the, you know, Hispanic people getting picked up for like a job for the day.
That's still very much a thing in the U.S. Yes.
Okay, that kind of thing.
Like
too,
everywhere in the southern parts of the U.S.
It's something that like it's just something like, because I guess the Northeast you don't see it a lot because we just don't have the same.
Yeah, migrant workers are very much still a thing.
Yeah, I was just like, I assumed it was. But I don't see as much about it anymore.
That's because
people don't want to talk about it.
I'm not going to say what I was going to say. This isn't a political show.
I was just going to say people don't want to talk about it. And they have
the media found something else to scare people with.
That too. Media's terrible. Anyway, this is an apolitical statement. Media's terrible.
U.S. media is mostly propaganda.
Yeah.
That's a universally accepted statement, and it's true.
Yep. Anyway. So yeah. I think that's the basics of this. There's more details to the game, but it's, you know, funny little game that
it seems like a cool little thing you'd break out every once in a while.
Yeah, probably for like a one session, do some crazy job as a bunch of goblins kind of thing. Yeah. So funded, 9 days to go. Check it out if you're interested. And the last thing I wanted to talk about for our Tales of the Week, our news of the week, is a new module for the Mothership Sci-Fi Horror RPG, which is...
Mothership's pretty good.
Yeah, Warped Beyond Recognition. It's explore a spaceship, hunt down psychics, learns the secret of their powers, descend into madness. That's what they say about it, you know? I know a little bit about Mothership, more that it's an interesting game system I've heard things about, but I don't know a lot about how it's played. I might have looked it up in the past, but I don't remember. Because honestly, there's a lot of RPG systems, so it's hard to remember all the different forms.
Mothership is like a super old school Renaissance system, so it's rough. It's rough, right? But it is pretty fun.
This might be like a Joe era thing I talked about, so it's like many years ago.
Yeah, so the best way I can kind of... I'm thinking right, I think Mothership uses cards as well.
Well, oh god.
Because it's been a while since I played it. I might be conflating with the Alien RPG, which is very similar in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
Mothership RPG.
It looks like they call the original Zero Edition, and they've got a first edition that came out more recently. I don't know if it's last year, because they did a box set last year.
Mothership is the one that uses an inventory deck for items.
Okay.
And I think that's a very cool system. The Alien RPG also uses it.
Okay. Yeah, so it does look like, as old as the actual Zero Edition system is, they do have a newer one, at very least. So if you were interested in that, this is a module that I guess was originally for this Zero Edition, and they've updated it and improved it for First Edition. I guess the current edition of Mothership.
Makes sense.
So, got all the rules, got an adventure. It's I hate to say it's like one of those like classic RPGs, because I guess by now it's classic. I mean, the RPG Renaissance is like so long ago at this point, even like, fuck man. Like even a decade ago, it's kind of getting into classic. God.
Well, I don't believe Mothership came out that long ago.
I'm not actually sure when Zero Edition came out. I was trying to look it up, but okay, here, RPG Geek. When do you tell me information about
At least the first edition is new.
2018 might have been around where...
Yeah.
Because that's when it came up on Board Game Geek.
Not too old.
No. Overall, not super, super old. But yes, the current first edition, pretty new.
Yeah. You can pre-order the box set for it on their website.
God, I might have talked about this with Joe back in the day then, certainly. It's not God. After a couple hundred episodes here, I sort of remember certain things, and as much as I like to be like, oh, there's a really interesting sci-fi horror, sci-fi horror has shown up a couple of times.
It's a pretty standard setting for a lot of things.
Yeah.
Very popular. Very good genre.
I think that's the reason that it's popular and shows up a lot. So, I think that's it for our basic news, is that we've got that also out, and it is too funded if you want to get it on the module. So all the things are funded then. Do I want to do last week's other topic I came up with, or another topic that we have? Because I came up with another topic last week when I came up with the topic we talked about. Let's just do that. I'll just keep it simple.
Fair enough.
Because it's the one in mind. I was also thinking about... We were talking about a lot more natural disasters last week. But that's not only the kind of disaster your people can face. What I wanted to call it was disasters of society. Because that's another thing, we were talking about how, natural disasters, it feels more environmental and stuff.
Yeah.
And there are bad things that happen in a society, and they can be natural related, could be a plague. It's going to be more of a disaster in your society, but it is technically natural based, and there can be only maybe so many clerics to heal people, and so many things, and like especially if it's like a magical disease or something, it might be hard to get rid of.
Yeah.
Especially in a magic world. And it could have been caused by someone. There's like evil plots like that, stuff. But a plague can be a setting and a threat, also.
A little real.
War. It's a big thing.
War's a big one. War's a pretty easy one.
Like a plague, like more like not like the disease plague, but like plague of some kind of creature or enemy or something, that we didn't really talk about it for because again, like that's something like the plague of locust, that's not really going to be something that's really necessarily going to affect players, but it can. I mean, I guess if you make it like a lot of flesh-eating locusts.
Enough locusts can impede your path no matter what you are.
I mean, I was more for they're probably not going to be too much of a threat overall. They might slow you down, but they're not really going to be like,
A big old cloud of locusts is pretty hard to move through.
Yeah. Maybe not like, oh, hey, volcano, I'm going to melt you. Or winds are going to blow you away.
Locusts just causes the famine your players will die to afterwards.
Yeah. But I mean, like, it could be something a little bit more like, it's a plague of goddamn giant ants, and you're in a city that they're coming after, That's a weird thing to come up with, and it's like, well, what the hell do you do? Gigantic dog-sized ants are, like, swarming towards your city.
True.
It has a little bit more fantastical, but, but if you're individuals, certainly you could just move out of the way, but if you're, like, people in a society, then it actually becomes a thing your players might want to get involved or deal with. So that's kind of where I'm defining it. It's like it's a different kind of disaster that can backdrop your games, and I don't think I really use these a lot either. I think I use these less when when I'm taking a step back and thinking about it. I'm like, there can be some very interesting stories to this of like, oh hey, maybe there's a villain causing it, or maybe there's a reason behind this, or it can be just a threat like your volcano, your tsunami, or earthquake, or something like that, which it oftentimes is more of than an actual story beat. But these feel like a lot more times they become the story beat,
Yeah, I mean, I have an example where I used one of them as a backdrop, but it never really came up in the game. When I ran the short, 15-session Cyberpunk fantasy game that I did, it never came up because none of you ever, watched the news or talked to anyone. But the backdrop for the setting is a massive Cold War between two major factions.
Yeah.
It just never came up in the game, but there were some off mentions of it. The players were never in a position to ever be directly involved with it.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing is, I'd heard about that and I remember it when you said, oh, the Cold War, oh yeah, that's true. And I took it as my character thinking about it how would I have done something related to this if it was our Cold War we had? Well, probably would have just been a backdrop of it's something in the world,
Jay made a character that was active in it. He was the ex-government official. Basically, he was a CIA agent.
What? It makes sense why his character then would be related to it a little bit more.
His character was very weird, yeah.
His character was very weird.
Man, that man got suplexed through a table twice.
He was an interesting character, but I feel out of all the weirdness in our characters, he technically was the weirdest in a way.
On the chances. He picked a subclass at level 3, unlike you.
Look, he was magical to begin with. I became magical.
You didn't take a goddamn subclass to level 4.
I can't be kidding. I'm what subclass? What's that? Oh. Oh god.
Yeah, I don't use them that often. I know I've been in games where like war was used as a backdrop, but like there's nothing player characters can do about a war.
Yeah.
What are they gonna do? Fight the entire enemy army? No, they're 5 dudes.
I mean, certainly there are war games where it's sort of like you can be a like scouting group or like a people on missions. Like, oh hey, go attack this point, you know, to distract the enemy or something like that.
Lightning super high level mega one shot.
Yeah. Now that was like a little bit more direct big war story, except we weren't involved with anybody else. But
Yeah.
you know, certainly there also are like, you know, actual war games, so the rules of it have always sucked.
Mass combat's terrible.
Mass combat has always been terrible. There's like
Never been good.
very few ways to make it actually seemingly work. Simpler is usually the better, I'm going to say.
Yeah.
But, you know, there are things around a war you can do. You can have your players be involved in it. You can have your players not be involved in it. They may be stuck in the middle of a war and got to figure out how to get out of there. Or, like, you know, do whatever mission you have them on.
I know that I was in a game a while ago on Sundays where basically like a war broke out in the middle of it, and we did end up kind of dealing with part of it because a rogue general was like, I'm like basically like, fuck the rules of war. I'm gonna go way behind enemy lines and just start killing their civilians, and we had to go kill that guy.
Yeah. You know, that's kind of what I agree with Worm there. That's like you make your characters do tactical, important, related to the war without directly fighting it. I think, like, it's the same with, like, honestly, something like a lot of these. Like, hey, an actual, like, disease, a plague. They probably aren't going to be doing a lot of direct stuff. They might be like, hey, we need this medicinal plant, or hey, go stop this guy that's causing the plague, or go to this place to research it, or something like that.
Like, it's hard to do, and I'm just going to use, like, war's the easy example, so I'm going to continue using that, because that's the one that probably comes up the most in games, right? Most of the time, unless you are a level 20 cool dude, you're not going to have, like, a huge impact on the war, right? Like, you're not going to be Master Chief or Commander Shepard. You're not going to carry the war on your back.
No.
You can certainly be part of it, like with Worm said, where you are in specific turning battles.
Yeah.
When I think the Wrath of the Righteous AP Pathfinder does very well.
Yeah. I even think, like, you know, you having important missions that make you a hero of the war, but you're not, like, directly fighting. You're like, go take out this other elite guy or something, you know, or go, you know, destroy a supply line. Go find out go attack the enemy commander in, like, a stealth, like, assassination mission. Or, like, there are things that your players can do that have huge impact and might make them heroes, but they're not, like, fighting every last one of people. I think, like, war, again, like, I think this is expanding on last week is what we're kind of doing here, is to, like, things that are natural yet not natural. There are other types of disasters.
War wouldn't be a natural disaster, but it's the effects and aftermath of it would be because of devastated land, shit like that, right?
Yeah.
It's a very, especially in medieval and Renaissance war, it is very common to just burn everything as you go.
Yeah. And I think the difference between how we were talking about things last week, because if, let's say, I'm taking a volcano or hurricane or tornado, they're either going to be a backdrop of your game or a big threat that their characters are going to have to deal with. They are not solving the problem of volcano and stuff like that. And I'm not saying they're solving the problem of war, but they can be involved in it, which is not something you can do with the other disasters. These are disasters which can have a solution that maybe your players are there's a 99% chance your players aren't going to be the ones directly doing it, but they can be involved in that solution.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's why it's a different kind of disaster that we have to talk about, because again, the backdrop of the natural ones we talked about last week is you can't really get away from that. It's always a little bit more in the background, always there. This stuff just hits your story more than that other stuff. Again,
a war is more world affecting than a volcano for the most part.
Yeah. Like, even if it's like a war between like two rival, let's say like barons that each have like a one land, that could have an effect on the overall kingdoms they're part of, or the kingdom they're part of after their battle, because it could have political implications that spread throughout the area. It could destabilize the region. There are things that could happen because it might not. You never know. That's up to you and your players to kind of like work how the story ends up if you're doing that in the game. But I think the same can be said for like, you know, the plague, or like, you know, army of natural enemies or something kind of thing, or like I guess war yet not war, I would call it, like you know, a non-politically aligned army or a large group of things that are attacking, destroy a thing.
Yeah.
You know, it could just be like a swarm of like a bunch of like you know, like a bunch of ogre tribes get together and decide they're going to attack this place because they've been, you know, attacked a lot of times. Are they political? Do they control the area? Fuck no. But they might be a threat to that city because they've gotten together because they've been maybe like hunted and attacked by the people for a long period of time. You can't really solve that because, again, like, that's... Yeah, ogres, they're kind of smart, but they're not, you know, not super smart. They're not... They're a... And their societies are oftentimes very violent and, like, you know, bloody in comparison to, like, you know... Normally, warring factions are very civilized societies. Unfortunately, ogres are one of those groups that most of them aren't very civilized, I would say. You know, there are exceptions, but those are individuals, not the society. I think I've been thinking about some like other things that could like be lesser but still on this, and you mentioned something with the plague of locusts. Famine could be something like this too. It would have huge effects, like especially like if you're in like a large city where a famine is taking place. Just that backdrop could be like such a huge thing on how it's affecting, like, you know, food prices are expensive, you know, there's like people like worried about getting food, a lot more violence and stuff. It destabilized the entire region. And, you know, that's one that maybe your story has your players set to be involved in it. Maybe not. It could just be something that adds the tension there. Same with all the other things. I'm trying to think of some other major ones.
In the current game I run, and this one is more tied to the direct story of the game, to be fair. Even if I was running from a different story, it would still be there. The region that the country or whatever that the game is set in has an issue with basically insurgencies, right? The original faction that ruled there was kicked out, and there's like a couple hundred years ago were kicked out in a war. There's still factions of them there that are causing problems, disrupting things, and just being bad, right?
Yeah.
That they cause disasters in that country. So you could use something even small like that as a form of a disaster in a game.
Impressive government. It could be something that directly or indirectly affects your players too. You could be in like a country where like effectively like the country's overflowed and like a kind of like a noble dictator was kind of installed or something, where they've got like a crackdown on a lot of people and stuff like that. And that could be related to your character's plot. It could just be a backdrop that they happen to be in this country and it's not a great place to be at. And I think these are like these are big things that affect a lot of people. And I think that's why I call them kind of a disaster. Like even like a super oppressive government sucks really bad for a lot of people. You know, it's something most people don't want to be under. So like that's why I kind of like put that under the that too. It's the thing that like a lot of these more societal disasters, the difference between the natural and the societal is the societal one is one that a lot of us as people can empathize with a lot more. You know, like certainly after, let's say, a hurricane, you might want to help out a few people, but like you may be like, oh, we'll just rescue them and, you know, send them to someone that could help them out. You know, it's a small thing. You know, it's could be saving people's lives. I'm not saying that saving people's lives is a small thing. I'm like, you're not involved yourself in like big things, but like there's a famine, you know, and it's like, you know, mysterious like famine started, or like a plague or like a war. Depending on your players, they might want to be more involved in that because it's like, oh, hey, my home country went to war, or these people that I grew up with are starving, you know, or sick. I might want to be involved in this more. I think that's the other thing about a lot of these things is it's good at drawing your characters into the. It's easier to draw your characters in the story. Societal problems and disasters.
Yeah, when you have a backdrop like that, it's easier to have a character that can fit into the world.
Yeah. It's interesting because these are both of these things are like two sides of a coin, that they're like both things that have huge effects on your games, the natural and the societal disasters. It's just that you use them slightly differently and they have different effects on your players, but they are going to be big things no matter what. Yeah. So are there any other specifics that I it's like the thing I can't think of any, like I've hit the major specifics I wanted to kind of that I was thinking of. And I'm sure there's like smaller things or other things that are related to this entire endeavor that can come up. You know, you said like insurgencies, that's definitely an issue, like with like rebels and stuff that can have a large effect. I guess like things like religious upheavals and stuff like that. That could be interesting if one of your characters, like religion, is involved in that. Like if what deity your cleric serves is one of the two people involved in that. Wow.
Yeah.
Certainly does change things.
Absolutely.
I think it's similar to the natural disasters. Is these are all very interesting, but you got to be careful when using them. Like a war is a big thing, you know, as we're using the war as the example. It's going to have a lot of ramifications, and it's a background of stuff that's going on, and certainly your players can either be involved in it or not, but it's always going to be there too once you established it. I think that's also the difference with these and something like the tornado or the hurricane or a volcano. Those usually end a lot quicker.
Usually, yeah.
Yeah, they're usually a lot quicker. Volcano erupts. Okay, maybe it's doing some stuff, but it's done erupting. There's an earthquake. Maybe a few aftershocks, but it's done. Hurricane, it passed. You know? War, it's around there for a while. Your players are going to be dealing with it for a while. Same things like plagues and, you know, all that other stuff. They take a while to solve in comparison to. And again, also much more manageable for, like, you can get involved, actually, in a lot of these things. So, so don't be afraid to use them. Just recognize that they're similar to the natural disasters. Don't be afraid to use them. Just recognize they are different in their own things. So, I guess we can talk about our week in gaming.
Yeah, we had a week.
I mean, like, you probably had more games than me, as usual.
Most likely. How'd
Sunday go?
Sunday has done pretty well so far. It is Lightning's Magical Earth game. We went to investigate a graveyard that had reported sightings of like ghosts and shit.
Okay.
And we fought a bunch of zombies. We're level 1 characters, so it shouldn't have been a problem. However, Lightning rolls too high. And I believe every hit was like a max damage roll.
Ouch.
So Cell went down in like turn 2. Which is unfortunate, but it happens. There's not much you can do about it.
Yeah.
The zombies were interesting because they were being created by some kind of very, very strange artifact that when things are influenced by it, it causes them to dance. So the corpses were the zombies were dancing at us as they were moving.
So many people are not going to get this reference, but I can only think of Weekend at Bernie's 2.
I forgot that's a movie.
The only reason I remember
Bernie's a thing.
I remember that movie because it's just the dance, because they use voodoo to animate a corpse and cause it dance.
Yeah.
And
or
it was
Thriller. It's like the easier reference.
True.
But yeah, it was
90s movie.
It was the right amount of silly, I think, because it was still a very dangerous threat. Because like a week ago we were just normal fucking people, and then the zombies are real, and also all weird magical shit is real.
Yeah.
You know, I went from a normal person to being a literal dragon. And Cell has a knife that talks to him and says it's God, so that's probably fine. That was Sunday. It was a good time.
Monday. I can say kind of what I did on Space Game on Monday. We ended up getting in a fight with a giant robot that had the special ability of making more robots.
Nice.
So, it turns out that I could hit stuff, but I do 66. I rolled below average.
Nice.
Every hit.
Hell yeah.
I could. The thing is, these things had like 10 defense, so I needed a good hit, and like my average damage should be like 25 or 26 or something. I was rolling like 17, 18. It was bad, the amount of low damage, and they couldn't hit me or do damage to me either because I had pretty good defense. Nice. I was tanking a whole shit ton of robots and not doing a lot.
Yeah, that's fair.
I was distracted. I was the tank. My character's role is piloting the ship and then being the tank in combat.
Fair.
Yep. How did Tuesday go?
Yeah, I do want to say, because Lightning did bring it up, we did on Sunday have like cards drawn to tell our futures and fortunes and shit.
Ah.
It was pretty standard. But Lightning said, when I got mine drawn, he said the words Western style dragon, which meant, European dragon. But in my brain, I pictured a dragon in a cowboy hat with a gun. And I was really, really confused.
I, in fact, really
was very confused as why that was a card in this lady's deck. And then I realized, I'm just an idiot.
Oh, God. That is...
As for Tuesday, the session was canceled because the DM was sick.
Okay.
Like, pretty bad. He couldn't speak.
Yeah. We had Wednesday.
We did have Wednesday, which I blacked out for half of it.
I mean, it was the point where, like, I put in some interesting kind of storyline stuff of, like, that really probably is not going to involve your characters at all. But it's, like, backstory stuff,
Mm-hmm.
Turns out, the Elder Dragon Conclave is actually a bunch of um, deities that had been cursed by the aboleths in an old war back in like the Age of Serpents. And in order to like undo the damage to their beings, they made a deal with Pharasma to basically give up a lot of their divine powers and reincarnate as nigh immortal ancient dragons. So that was an interesting thing, and turns out Yakul's grandparent is experimenting not only to figure out what can breed with dragons, but also like, does breeding with unusual things spark something divine in my descendants because I once was designed? And also mention that they do, honestly like having sex.
Yeah. I mean, it's weird, man. That's why I wasn't there for that conversation.
And then you basically met with a person that was like, hey, I can get you in a meeting with a bunch of sea elves.
Sea elves. And probably have some island chatting because we're back there now.
Yeah, and the island chatting, yeah. Which specifically, it was one of those things that you gave me an excuse to use because they specifically say, like, if you really get on that guy's, on Mace's good side, he will try to introduce you to his father to basically be like, hey, you seem to get along with, like, water creatures. You gave me that I could use that entire thing that they mention in the book as something like that, something you can do. So, hey, I can use that. I had the option of using it because you actually did all the things to, like, hit his you guys are pretty good buttons.
True.
Yep. So, some more information. You're, I guess, technically back on main storyline, even though this is, like, complete...
Pit stop. And, well, it's a pit stop because, I mean, it might be, we might not have time to get the sword as well. Like, that's why we're doing the sword last, is if we need to skip it, we can.
I'm gonna be honest, like, unless you, like, really take your time, like, it hasn't been long enough that I'm gonna, like, force the point at this point.
I feel like we've kind of done, like, everything to prepare at this point.
Yeah.
Because we're kind of, I mean, the CLs will probably get us some help. I might be able to squeeze some help out of allies and friends I have in Chelix still, but that one's a long shot. His messages take a while, and I don't have sending.
Yeah. So, a couple more things to kind of explore in that, but you're kind of getting close to the big battle, which we got to figure out how I'm going to do that.
I mean, I can give you some advice on how to do it after this show.
I have to look how they talk about it in the book, too. I honestly might just cinematic a lot of it and then just...
What I would do is not do the mass combat.
Yeah.
I would cinematic everything around our ship engaging the wormwood.
Yeah.
And that's it, right? Because mass combat with people is bad enough. Mass combat with ships is horrific.
It's just kind of like the ship combat is like... It's just...
Because the ship combat is already a level of difficulty. And then having to control ship squadrons above that, that's too much for people who've never done it before.
And the ship combat, the one that they do provide a relatively simple one, but it's still like...
There's still a lot of number crunching.
And I might just also skip like the, you engage the wormwood and like ram each other for boarding or something, because I've been told like, hey, you should take some of these people alive on this ship, because they will have information we can't get, Especially
we also have a built for ramming.
Yeah. Hey, their first mate is probably someone that knows stuff, about, like, the fortress you want to attack. Where,
yeah, and we can keep the wormwood as a prize.
You can.
Fuck you, Harry. Go and get your ship, bitch.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So... how'd Thursday go?
Thursday, I think, went pretty well. Party is exploring... I believe this is the third flesh cave that's shown up in a game.
Oh, the flesh caves.
It's basically a spaceship.
Mm.
This one isn't a cave. Because, again, I have the whole lost technology aspect of my world. more or less, they were exploring it because they wanted to put an AI that they had found into an actual body, and they were successful in doing that. So
Cool.
now they have a knowledge cleric friend who can help them roll knowledge checks and such. It turns out knowledge cleric actually pretty good. The party also experienced a lot of hallucinations on the ship.
Nice.
Including I could have done them better, but I was kind of like a little bit down. I had half of a player for that day. Lynn didn't really want to speak, so I couldn't really do a lot to their character. And everyone kept making their saves against being hallucinated and such.
Okay.
But there were some combats against like some horrible zombie monsters, and then there was a big combat against the source of the problem. And I think it was a pretty good fight that killed it. Cell got like the shit kicked out of them. And probably took a bunch of damage, but they won, and then they learned that these ship pieces are like this because the crew of them had found an artifact, and that artifact is now possibly in the hands of the insurgent abyssal elves, which are drow basically, but less bad lore, because drow lore is yikes.
Yeah.
And these elves in particular are still very mad about their cities being basically death fogged. And they just blame all humans. Because, spoilers, elves live like 1,000 years, so these elves saw this firsthand.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then they might go to the capital to visit. Oh, they also learned there's a big, like, precursor ruin under the capital of the country. And a bunch of a bunch of lore information on the world that may have broken one character's mind a little bit. Because it kind of threw away everything he learned throughout his entire education. They're on a divine plane of the Shadow Goddess. And all of their technology is based on an ancient cyberpunk world from another universe.
Good times. Let's see. Is there anything else to pop in? Talk about?
Oh, lightning. Can we talk about the thing you, I, and Jay did on Wednesday a little bit? Or is that a no? Because it was a playtest of sorts. I ask not knowing if you're here.
Was around. Might not.
I also had a Friday game I can talk about.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, so we playtested Lightning's custom system. I played a mage, Jay played basically a paladin.
Okay.
System combat felt really good. The magic system I was using is basically, here are mana points, here are some examples of spell tiers. You don't have to use these, but here's the rules for damage die, and then you can just pretty much make up your spell. There really aren't any set spells. You have a lot of creative freedom in what you do, but the damage they do is set.
Okay.
So, like, an enemy got really close to me, so I used my spell casting to propel myself with a jet of flame away from them, burning them in the process. Or I placed my hand on the ground and sent a pillar of fire up above an enemy, right?
Okay.
Which these are spells that don't exist in a lot of systems, because a lot of systems have very rigid spell systems. Set of this is one of the things I don't like about Pathfinder and 5e have this problem of, these are the spells that exist, no one has ever made any new spells, right? Fireball is always going to be Jim's Fireball, because Jim made it, that's his, no one's ever improved upon it.
I think at least Pathfinder allows for that a little bit, but like specifically like you have to do some things to have your character be able to do that. Or like,
like in especially in 5th edition, these are the spell list. These are the spells that exist in the world.
Yeah.
They don't really give you rules for making spells.
I think it's the thing is it's like it is still pretty rigid in Pathfinder, but it is a lot less cut and dry than freaking 5e is, unfortunately.
The system felt great. I think we're gonna do another playtest eventually. We learned a lot with the system. I think Lightning got some really good advice. Jay's character basically did the paladin thing of oops all damage to things. So it was a good playtest.
I mean, like, the magic system reminds me of actually the way they defined magic actually. I don't know if they did it the same in 4th edition, but the 3rd edition of Besom. Where it almost like you put points into magic, and then it was like a pool of, like, nebulous points. As long as you did things within your magical abilities, you could switch the points around to do things. You could be like, oh, I switch my points around, I can create a wall of fire now, or like, you know, a flame jet, or, you know, something like that. And it was it was specifically meant to be just like nebulous powers you can kind of switch around, but they're all like magic based.
Yeah, there are schools of magic in the system, so if you do like gold mana, you can do fire spells. I think like green mana is you like geomancy from divinity, more or less.
Okay.
Violet mana, I believe, is like poison and disease.
All right. So you were saying you did something on Friday?
We did a thing on Friday. We went into a dungeon to find my character's ex-boyfriend from 30 years ago, because I horrifically died 30 years ago and then was brought back. So we had to go find him because he had information. Also, the fucker had a piece of my soul that I needed to be human again. We met a very frightened imp. We kept threatening the imp until he gave us what we wanted. He never really gave us what we wanted, so he did his stupid test anyways. It was a fine combat. It was basically like, here's 4 undead. There are objects in this. There's some objects in this room. If you kill the undead, you can break those objects, which hurts the real boss. Takes some invisibility away.
Okay.
Which is it's a simple combat, but done in a fun and interesting way. None of us could really roll, as per usual. Not even Cell. Although Cell did get a couple crits on the Barbarian, but the Barbarian has adamantine armor, so he's crit immune. The Barbarian also has a magic item that lets him use the Tabaxi speed boost ability. So he was moving at like 120 feet around, which was like insane. And that item is clearly fucking broken. It shouldn't exist, in my opinion, because that's too much movement.
That is a lot of movement. That sounds like it was an interesting time.
Yeah, and then we learned world stuff about how awful this country is and how we're probably just going to let it burn to the ground.
Yeah. Honestly, that makes sense. That happens a lot where you're like, this place is awful.
Man, it's like we've not been given a good reason for why the villain is evil. I'll be honest. Because everyone else has been like super dickish and just awful. But the villain's the only one who's actually been helping us. And he's the villain. so I don't understand it. I don't get what Cell's doing, but last session was actually kind of fun because of that weird combat.
Sounds like it was interesting, at least.
Yeah. I'm a full paladin now. I replaced my dumb blood hunter levels with oops all paladin, so now I can be lawful stupid. Have to look at architecture when they torture people.
Yeah. But fine, but rustic architecture. Up, you're tormenting people. I see nothing, I hear nothing.
Oh yeah, Lightning's character continued the great escapade of terrible plans when they took their alchemy jug, made tea with it, and then just handed it to me, and then like expected me to waterboard an imp with tea. When imps are immune to heat and fire damage, so I don't know how that would have worked.
What?
Yeah, that was Lightning's plan, was to use the tea on the imp somehow to kill it. And I never figured that one out.
Okay. It was a plan.
I mean, it's about on par with that character's other plans. At least they're funny plans,
True. You ask for that sometimes, at least. It's like, well, this is kind of funny as a plan.
Funny plan. And then they tortured the imp afterwards. It's an imp. No one cares about imps.
Yeah, you don't.
It's someone's familiar, but that dude doesn't care what happens to it.
This is true. Most of the time, people with an imp familiar do not care because they tend to be evil. Mm-hmm. Poor thing, face full of butt.
Jealous, honestly. I've seen the character art Lightning is using. The fox lady, as per usual.
Of course. Anything else done this week? I think that's about it.
That's it. That's the week. That was the week in tabletop.
It was a heck of a week. So hey, yeah. I guess that takes us to the end of the show. If you're looking for next week's schedule, I'll be back on Monday. I'll be doing more Shadows of Loathing. I don't know what else after I'm finished that. That's kind of like I might finish that game next week. I might not. I don't know how long it is.
It's like West of Loathing, fairly long.
Yeah. I mean, I'm a good chunk of the way into it. I've gotten I'm on day... I'm about to go to chapter 4-ish, I guess, technically. So, not quite sure how many, honestly, it is, I can't remember how many West of Loathing. It was long, but I don't remember chapters it was.
Yeah.
And I feel like these are shorter chapters than West of Loathing, so there might be more of them, too. But it's kind of hard to tell sometimes. So I'll play more of that. Expect more from on the schedule. I'll kind of throw it out there when I kind of get it up there. I've got a couple ideas of some things to do during the week. Buccaneers on Wednesday, the show next Saturday, and that's it. So, thank you for joining, Mama.
Yeah, no problem.
Yeah, I'll be back on Monday. I hope everybody has a great rest of your weekend. If something weird comes up and the schedule changes, or I come up with something new on the schedule on the fly, I'll let people know on Discord and Twitter. Otherwise, I'll be off on adventures. So, I hope everybody enjoys this weekend and comes back to check out stuff next week. Either morning streams for me, or gaming for Buccaneers on Wednesday, or this show next Saturday. So, make sure to check them out. Bye everybody. I can't think of anything else to say. Farewell. Bye.